Thomas Reed, 42 years old, sat in that courtroom wearing his only suit, a suit he hadn't worn since his mother's funeral. Now he was wearing it to fight for his life. He wasn't a criminal. He was a mechanic, ran his own shop, paid his taxes, took care of his daughter after his wife passed away. He wasn't perfect, but he'd never been in trouble with the law. So when they told him he was a suspect in an armed robbery, he laughed. At first, until the cuffs went on. Now here he was, facing 20 years, for something he didn't do. His lawyer, a younger woman named Jessica Miles, stood and played the gas station footage. There was Thomas, buying a bottle of water and a pack of gum. The clerk waved at him like an old friend. The timestamp? Same time the robbery was supposedly happening on the other side of town. Jessica turned to the jury. This man couldn't be in two places at once. The courtroom seemed to breathe for the first time. You could feel the tension loosen, just a bit, until the prosecutor stood up. Older man, polished voice, no-nonsense presence. He didn't raise his voice, didn't get emotional. He just walked to the screen and paused the footage, zoomed in, pointed to Thomas's right wrist. Noticed the bracelet. Thomas looked down. He wore it every day. His daughter gave it to him. Silver chain, little charm, nothing flashy, just sentimental. The prosecutor pulled out a printed photo from the robbery scene, grainy black and white still from a convenience store camera. "Here's the suspect," he said. Everyone leaned in. There, on the blurry wrist of the masked man, a bracelet. Same position, same shine. The room shifted. The energy changed. You could feel it in your gut. "We don't just have a coincidence," the prosecutor said. "We have a match." Jessica objected, but even she looked shaken. Thomas stared straight ahead, hands folded, eyes locked. He could see it now. That doubt. It had crept into the jury's faces. One little detail had sliced through everything. Never mind the gas station clerk. Never mind the timestamp. Never mind that the suspect was 6 inches shorter than him. They saw the bracelet, and suddenly the truth wasn't so clear. He whispered to Jessica, voice shaking, "That's not proof." She nodded but didn't speak, because in that moment, they both knew. Truth wasn't always enough. Jessica stood at the defense table, fidgeting with the paperclip. Thomas sat beside her, still, quiet, jaw clenched like stone. The bracelet on his wrist had become a shackle. It hadn't left a mark, but it had left doubt. And in a courtroom, doubt can spread like wildfire. That night, back at her apartment, Jessica rewatched the gas station footage for the third time. And then something strange happened. She paused, rewound, paused again. There was a flicker, barely noticeable, right when Thomas was at the register. A glitch. For a moment, the timestamp on the footage skipped forward by nearly 45 seconds. "That's not right," she whispered. She called the gas station manager, Mr. Kowalski, an older Polish man who ran the place for 20 years. He met her the next morning, tired eyes behind thick glasses. "Yeah, the camera time jumps sometimes. Been that way for years. I tell the city to fix it, but they don't care. Still accurate within a minute or two." Jessica stared at him. A minute or two could mean everything. In court the next day, she brought it up. The judge narrowed his eyes. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "You're telling us the footage you used to prove your client's innocence might not even be reliable." Jessica hesitated. "No, I'm telling you it's accurate, within a small range. But the defense didn't alter anything. This is a flaw in the city's own camera system." But the damage was done. The jury looked at her differently now. That tiny glitch had become a weapon. Then came the witness. A young man named Trevor Banks, 19. Said he was walking home from work the night of the robbery. Said he saw someone running into an alley with a gun in hand. Said he remembered a silver bracelet. The prosecutor leaned in. "Could this man, Thomas Reed, be the person you saw?" Trevor hesitated, looked around the courtroom, then nodded. "It might have been. Same build, same bracelet." Jessica stood, furious. "He said it was dark. You saw the back of the suspect for 3 seconds from across the street. You really expect this court to believe that's enough to convict a man?" Trevor looked down. I'm not sure." But not sure wasn't a win. Not for Thomas. Not in this courtroom. Because not sure was enough for reasonable doubt to cut both ways. And the jury? They weren't weighing certainty anymore. They were swimming in suspicion. That night, Thomas sat in his holding cell. He stared at the wall, voice low. "I didn't even want to wear the bracelet that day," he said. "My wrist was swollen. My daughter insisted. Jessica said nothing. What could she say? She was losing. And truth, cold, factual, logical truth, was slipping through her fingers. But the fight wasn't over. Because what Jessica found next would turn the entire case upside down. It started with an email. No subject. No signature. Just 6 words. Ask for the traffic cam logs. Jessica stared at the screen. The email came from a burner account. No traceable IP. No history. She almost deleted it. But something told her not to. She forwarded it to her private investigator, Rick Thompson, a retired detective who now made his living chasing loose ends others ignored. Traffic cams. Rick said. City footage. Good luck. That stuff's buried under paperwork and bureaucracy. Jessica nodded. Then we start digging. The request took 3 days. Calls. Emails. More calls. She was told the footage had already been archived. Told the file didn't exist. Told the system was under maintenance. But finally, Rick had a contact inside the Department of Transportation who owed him a favor. And that's when the truth came to light. The footage from the traffic cam across the street from the gas station. Angle. Low, wide, and slightly obscured by a tree. But there it was. Thomas's red Ford truck pulling into the gas station lot. Timestamp 9:04 p.m. Robbery reported at 9:05. Across town. Jessica's heart skipped. The gas station camera had glitched, yes, but the city's traffic cam didn't. He was where he said he was, she whispered, and we can prove it. Back in court, she filed a motion to admit the new footage. The prosecutor protested. It's too late. Discovery's over. The judge, a fair but firm man named Judge Whitaker, rubbed his chin. Let me see it, he said. They played the clip on the courtroom monitor. No jump. No glitch. Just Thomas's truck pulling in at exactly 9:04 p.m. Jessica turned to the jury. That robbery couldn't have been committed by Thomas Reed. He was 17 minutes away in traffic. You saw it. This camera doesn't lie. The courtroom was quiet. Even the prosecutor sat still, lips tight. Thomas looked at his daughter in the gallery. She smiled, eyes full of tears. She had made him wear the bracelet. And now, maybe, that same bracelet wouldn't be the thing that destroyed him, but the thing that saved him. Thomas sat in the courtroom, his fingers gripping the edge of the table like a man hanging on for dear life. The courtroom was fuller now. Word had spread. People from the neighborhood came to see what justice looked like when it hung by a thread. Jessica stood, her closing statement in hand. But she didn't read it. She looked straight at the jury and spoke from the heart. This is a case of mistaken identity. A man nearly lost everything because someone saw a bracelet, not a face. Because a camera glitched for a few seconds. Because someone wanted this wrapped up quick and clean. But justice isn't clean. And it's not fast. It's patient. It's detailed. It requires us to slow down and look at every truth we don't want to see. She paused, her voice steady. Thomas Reed is not a perfect man, but he is an innocent one. And if you take a man away from his child, from his shop, from his life, based on doubt, then what does that say about any of us? The room was silent. Even the judge looked moved. But across the courtroom, the prosecutor rose like a vulture who smelled fresh meat. He wasn't done yet. He held up a new report. A forensic analysis from the police department suddenly entered into evidence. We had the bracelet examined, he said. Turns out, Thomas's charm is slightly larger than the one seen in the robbery footage. Different brand, different weight. He turned to the jury. So maybe the bracelet wasn't the same after all. Maybe this isn't the man. Maybe the defense is right. But then his voice dropped, quiet, calculated, sharp. Or maybe he swapped a bracelet after the robbery. Maybe the traffic cam footage was just a clever setup. After all, a criminal this smooth? He'd planned for something like this. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Jessica shot up. Objection. That's pure speculation. Sustained. The judge barked. The jury will disregard that last comment. But it was too late. The seed had been planted. Again. In the jury box, faces shifted. Doubt returned like a ghost that refused to stay buried. That night, Jessica sat in her car outside her apartment, staring through the windshield. This wasn't just about Thomas anymore. It was about the system. The way it always had an extra card up its sleeve, ready to play just when the truth was finally gaining ground. The next morning, the jury returned. Thomas held his breath. Jessica gripped his arm. 12 people stood between him and 20 years. The courtroom was still. You could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. 12 jurors filed in like ghosts, some stiff, some pale, none making eye contact. Jessica didn't blink. Thomas didn't breathe. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked over his bench. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The foreman, a gray-haired man with sun-wrinkled skin and a trembling lip, stood. We have, Your Honor. He handed the paper to the bailiff. The bailiff handed it to the judge. The judge read it, slowly. And then, on the charge of armed robbery in the first degree, we find the defendant, Thomas Reed. A pause. Not guilty. The room didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. There was no applause. Just a heavy, powerful silence. The kind of silence that falls when the world almost caves in, and then doesn't. Jessica exhaled for the first time in minutes. Thomas's knees buckled slightly. He sat down, hands shaking. His daughter in the back row began to cry. Quietly. No sobs. Just relief. Pure and raw. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Cameras clicked. Microphones shoved forward. Thomas, do you feel vindicated? What would you say to the system that put you here? He looked straight ahead. Calm. Measured. I'd say this time, the truth got through. But I'm not the only one sitting in a courtroom today, with no one listening. Jessica stood beside him. She'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Because the system hadn't failed. It had worked exactly the way it was built. And one lucky break, a single email, had turned the tide. That night, Thomas went home. Sat on his porch. Held his daughter's hand. He still wore the bracelet. But now, it didn't feel like a target. It felt like a scar that told a story. A story that would never leave him. But it would never silence him either.